As I was preparing to leave for my big trip to Seattle, just a couple days, I got a phone call, and apparently I needed to go meet with somebody higher up in my church, local higher up, and they gave me a new what's called calling or position at church, unpaid. Most things in Mormondom isn't paid, and they were like, okay, you're going to be the ward clerk. You're going to be in charge of all paperwork at the church. And I was just like, or, for your local congregation. And I was just like, oh, that's a lot of work. But okay. All right. I'm going to leave now. But it took forever. Google Maps actually gave me bad directions to the person's house that I was supposed to go to because it was all last minute. I just headed to his house so that we wouldn't have to meet somewhere in the middle. And I took some pictures, and that was that. Let's see. Yeah, wrong direction. And this is a pond near his house. It was quite the backwoods area. But yeah, I'm now in charge of the really dweeby stuff at my congregation. My trip to Ellensburg was pretty boring. I did discover something interesting. On the points that I know that my cruise control turns off or no longer works, I simply turned it off and waited a mile and then turned it back on. And it worked just fine after that. And so I'm going, okay, it's those spots. Something about these spots caused this. I believe that one of the spots is it's just so steep, the cruise control can't handle it, and it just kind of goes into shutdown mode. And the other spot, I believe there's some kind of bad EM trace right there, and it's just hitting my cruise control computer at the just at the correct frequency. Anyway, I got to Ellensburg, I got to Wendy's, and, bought my usual food. I didn't get Dr. Pepper this time. I bought orange cream soda, and that was a bit of a cheat for me. I'm trying to really hold it back on all of my sugar and all that intake because I've got some really high blood pressure, and I don't really know what's going on with that. It's got me scared a little. So this week, after all this, I'm going to go to the doctor, and I'm just like, man, this is a weird week. Anyway, the food was good, and I enjoyed my trip. Yeah, fries. Oh, so I got to my friend's house, had some milk and some water, or no, just water, and we watched Thor: The Dark World together, and it was so distracting. I forgot I was like needing to go to the bathroom, but I was so enjoying the movie that I wasn't really observing much as I should. But it was a very rainy time. I drove all the way from Ellensburg to Bremerton, and the entire way was so rainy I had to have my windshield wipers going as fast as they could. It was quite hectic. It wasn't as bad as a previous trip where I couldn't see, period. I could see enough so that I could maneuver and do things, so it was safer than previous times. But, oh man, that was really, really long. It actually affected my mileage, my miles per gallon. I went from, I think it took off a third of it somehow. So that became a real problem for me. And these are flowers at my buddy's house. Yay. Yay. And if you look very carefully, you'll see something video. Oh, here, let's zoom in a little. Authentic Mexican food. Need a massage, call such and such. And dentures, all in the same building. I just thought that was hilarious. And yeah. Yeah. So I get to Bremerton, and really I'm just there to pick up a friend. He doesn't have a car as much, so I was like, okay, just take the Bremerton ferry, and I'll pick you up, and we'll go to Gig Harbor. And I thought Gig Harbor was a lot closer than it is. Anyway, Bremerton was looking pretty nice, so I was like, oh, not bad. And I waited for in the ferry, and then we drove. We got we got within accuracy. We got within the area, but really we had to go from there where we're like, okay, is it down these roads or is it, let's go back a little. Let's see what we can. And we finally found the house, and it's usual Gig Harbor house, just middle of nowhere, but nice. And yeah, everybody was enjoying some food, and then the halfway, apparently they had half the meeting before we arrived, but then they had the other half after eating a bunch of food, and it was all good food. I mean, piles of meat. Reminds me of the old Hawaiian barbecue trick where you just have a bucket full of meat and you're just like, grab as much as you can. And if it starts to empty, don't worry. We've got another bucket. Oh, man, now I'm hungry. Anyway, we went down the list. Apparently, the big one is the guy over me at the kids zone is now over the kids zone completely. So that was interesting. And they talked about, who was coming and all this stuff. One of the, I've been waiting to do a video series based on what it's like to have one of these meetings, because these meetings are really, really important and how they work within planning sessions. So I will be talking about them more. And I took a bunch of fancy photographs because I felt like it. And it took forever to take the right photo. Anyway, usual Gig Harbor neighborhood. And then after that, everyone just kind of stood around and chatted about arcades. And I took fancy photos. Actually, this one is entirely because I was like, okay, this is a cool device. I may want to look into it a little bit more. As well as these glasses. And then we had what's called a repair party. And they basically opened up stuff and explained how to fix various machines. And then we had, the absolute top techs there as well. The guy in the middle is called Doc, and he's one of the best techs. And he's famous in the arcade world for his ability to fix stuff. And the guy's house, he had a bunch of Nintendo cabs, which for you doesn't mean anything, but for me it means they're very light and they're very fun. So I like Nintendo cabs. There we go. And then I took a bunch of fancy photos. And this is the underside of what's called an EM system. And yes, that Frankenstein's monster is an actual pinball machine called Miss O. And they had a guy named JP helping them out with that. And yeah, I just walked around. I thought the umbrellas really added to the flavor of the room. And this guy is actually in charge of a makerspace in, I believe it's Tacoma. And he's got all sorts of connections and stuff. It's interesting. And yeah, we had people for makerspace type stuff there. We had other stuff there. He was doing really cool. And we just really liked this light, so I wanted to take a picture of it. And watch this. If you watch carefully... Oh, never mind. And yeah, that's the stream stuff. And like most garages, he's got stuff everywhere, but it's all very well organized, so we were thankful for that. And he's got a nice little garden around his house, so... after that, we went to Costco for my buddy because he needed to grab some allergy stuff. And so I took pictures of stuff that might be useful for me later on. I didn't take a picture of the one thing I needed to take a picture of, which was a plastic bin to place books in. They're all $6, but, going to be... I might be moving pretty soon, so I want a place to put my books. And, oh, there we are. There's one. And, yeah, just took random pictures. And after that, we went to Home Depot, but I don't have any pictures of Home Depot. And we bought some stuff for what we call the war horn, because it literally makes it becomes a horn when you put it together. And he showed me all the parts to buy, and he said, just put this here, and, you'll have a horn. So for Cub Scouts, I'm going to assemble that. And that's the fountain in Bremerton. And I was just walking back to my car, and I was just like, wow, a bunch of stuff is open. I'm just going to go check. I know it's not very churchy of me to do something on Sunday, but this is my only chance to check this out. So I'm going to do this. And this is the Mini Neo Geo that is... I love this machine at the Northwest Pinball and Arcade Show. And yeah, it's exactly what it looks like. It's a mini Neo Geo. And I just walked through Quarters Arcade. The last time I was in the area, nobody was there. It wasn't open, so I couldn't walk through. So I took pictures. There's a bunch of modern games and, some good pinball. Time Crisis 4, which is the latest one out. And they've even got a battle pod. I mean, that is awesome. And, the usual kid stuff, the ticket games as well. And yeah, they had a bunch of stuff to check out and to enjoy. And it was just a small room, but they filled it as best they could. And apparently this is the first major arcade in in that area of Bremerton, and probably the one that really started the whole geek phase. There are other people ready to go in, but Quarters moved in first. And the Dolphin Stars game shows up in blah blah blah. Showed up at the Northwest Pinball and Arcade Show last year, so there's a lot of really cool stuff here. And he had an Injustice game, and I was like, I thought that was only for, specific companies. So I was really impressed. And then I went to a place just across the street. It's Blue Skies Hobby or something. But it's right across the street from Quarters. So I was talking to the guy there, and he's like, go downstairs. You should check out downstairs. So, these are actually games from Quarters. He just put them in there so that he can make a little more money. And, just nice little selection. And then check this out. Just row upon row of tables, rooms that you could just rent out so that you can play some Dungeons and Dragons. They've got all the equipment you need so that you can take care of it. And yeah, just props and tables everywhere. I was really impressed by what I saw. And then I came upstairs and, there's a board game area, there's a little snack area, and, a build it area, kind of a makerspace area right there, and more board games. And then they have an entire comics section, which was quite big for, the area they've got. And I was really impressed by it. And, they've got the latest stuff. And, yeah, then they have the model section over here. But really, it's models for Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. And they've got a little barista area. And, yeah, you can basically see what everything was about right here. And the closer you get to I took this picture because Pathfinder is something from another study I'm doing about Dungeons and Dragons and board games in jail or in prisons. And so I was like, hey, Pathfinder, I remember that. And yeah, just go down this way and you find the books for various Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinders and RPG type games with dice and stuff. And I went from there. And there's Quarters Arcade across the street, so there's no way you can miss this. And there's the shop. Yeah, the name is long, but you'll spot it really easily. And I just walked around and went, oh, I'm just going back to my car. And I saw this library, and I was like, ooh, nice Art Deco. And I saw this theater, and I was impressed. And I took pictures of flowers and was just kind of enjoying myself. And I was like, I think another castle is open, and I'm just going to go to another castle to see it. And my buddy Oz was there. The guy in charge of the Kid Zone was there. And so I walked around, quickly took some pictures, some a little bit too fast. And, I love my new camera because it shows everything a lot better. Not perfect, but better. You can get a lot more detail here. And yeah, quickly went in, took pictures, and then he took me to Ashley's Pub, which I knew existed, but I didn't know how to get to. And, we went downstairs and, there's a wall of board games. There's a bunch of stuff to buy. Since I don't drink, I couldn't, I didn't partake of any stuff there. I had to actually ask if they have a Dr. Pepper or something. They're like, can I have a Dr. Pepper? That's what I need. But yeah, they've got tables for board games, and they've got a console area. Uh, yeah, and those little yellow sheets you see are actually all the games that are available. So this is literally the same setup as the one I had back in Hawaii, except back in Hawaii we had a bowling alley, and honestly that bowling alley was a pain in the butt to take care of. But yeah, they decorated the entire area, and then they've got the pinball area, and really they're trying to figure out how to get in some vids in there, but every time they move in a vid, it goes down, so they move in a pin. And, walked around, took pictures. These are coloring books so that you can enjoy it. More coloring books. And let's see if I can get it. Oh, that dog. And yeah, this trophy apparently has a story that every time it's given to a team, they have to add on to it. So they added all sorts of stuff. That Barbie actually twists around the bar. And change machine, view from the arcade. And this is an interesting thing where if you read it correctly, let's see if we can zoom in a little. Yeah, there we go. Not perfect because of the darkness and stuff, but you can read it. And they're basically talking about pinball tournaments and pinball competitions. And my buddy Oz runs the league, a couple leagues, I guess, around the area. He's the guy who fixes half the machines, or most of the machines in the area. So, he gets paid pretty well. And every single thing here, he helps take care of. And they have, like, competitions to do things. And the big one is, league competitions and other competitions to kind of do stuff. And the KitSat selfie thing is you check what the high score is, and then you try to beat the high score, or you try to set a high score, and then you take a picture of yourself with a high score, and they will and then you post it over to Ashley's Pub, and they will take the highest scores and give you points for how many scores you get. And the person with the most points, i.e. the highest scores on all the machines, wins some kind of competition. I don't know what they get, but they do. And apparently there's a drink called multi-ball, but once again, I don't drink, so don't know what that's like. Anyway, because it was Sunday, they were putting together models, cutout models, and I just thought that was really cool. I talked to Ashley a little bit, but she was busy putting a model together. And they put Legos on the taps, and there's no rhyme or reason for which Lego gets what, but the numbers right there tell you what it gives you. And once again, I don't drink, so not a lot I can do. And this dog, if you remember from Emerald City Comic Con, she was a lot smaller back then, but it's the same dog. And I was just like, oh my gosh! And it took forever to get this picture. Or it didn't take much to get this picture, but this is the most focused I've ever gotten of her. She was kind of busy at the moment. But yeah, I got the picture. And I talked with Oz about moving to Bremerton because I'm looking to move. And Bremerton is really nice. And within like 2-3 blocks, you have all this cool stuff. So I'd like a job in the area. And yeah, just walked around, took pictures. Doo-doo. And if you look, and this is what I bought at Home Depot. That doesn't look like much. But if I add the pipe and that weird thing you see, the PVC connector over there, I can turn it into a horn. And it's called a war horn because it's very loud and it can go very, very bass. So you can hear it for miles. Also, when I was at the planning meeting, this guy gave me the soap, and it's from Togo. And I've got a plane flying over me. I don't know if you can hear that or not. But the soap is from Togo. It's all natural and all this stuff. And he gave it out for free. So I was like, cool. And it turns out he's from like Meridian. And I'm like, dude, I'm from Middleton. And we're like, yeah, Boise. And yeah, we had a little fun with that. Okay, that's not an airplane. What? I don't know. Okay, there's a street cleaner coming at me. So the that was my trip, and I'll talk more about it later, about what I discovered. And yeah, I'm totally going to talk about planning meetings and why they're important. And like the last, like May, I'm going to just talk about how to prepare for a convention, the various things about conventions and why they're important. And I will see you all later. Doo-doo-doo. I thought I'd make an addendum about all of this and point out, or I asked questions about how so much cool stuff could be within such a small area. And the answer I was given was there was a really open area where we were next to the naval base, and there's like 20,000 people working at the naval base or living at the naval base, and they've got a lot of money to spend. And the path, the best areas, or all the areas that are open, happen to be on the same road to the bank to pick up, your check, or to cash your check. So on your way, you can see all this stuff you want to get, and you've got all this spare money. So, why not? Why not treat yourself a little bit? And so they do this. All the theaters, all of the geek shops, all of the bars and stuff are all in this very small area just because that is the perfect spot for sailors and for tourists. And I then asked, why isn't this going on with Spokane, where I live? And they didn't really have an answer, but I think I know what it is. The Northwest Pinball and Arcade Show comes from a group called SMAC, Seattle Metro Arcade Collectors. And yeah, I know. The Portland Arcade Collectors is PAC, so, it doesn't really... I feel sorry for the Californian arcade collectors, that's all I can say on the matter. But they were organizing beforehand, before the all this stuff started showing up, and they decided, okay, let's do something about this, And so they went to they started talking to each other, and they started putting things together. And the guy who really spearheaded the area was Oz, the guy I know, and he helped them find, places to stay. Another castle wanted to move in. They knew Oz. Oz was like, okay, I'll find a place for you. And he actually wanted to do the place where Quarters is now. But but Quarters had moved in before he could snag it. And so we found another area, and they all worked together, and they got it there. And this did so well that they started to bring in more people, or more geek shops and geeky things. And because of this, you look down this road and you just see a lot of, well, not the alleyway, but you just see kind of a lot of things to do. This theater is new. It just plays classic shows. It also has a theater type thing, so you can do plays in there. And there's another theater. I'm not showing it. But you'll notice that they kind of reference the Sailor a lot. And he pointed out that there was just a lot of money going into the area. There were a lot of people who were bored and needed something to do. And, 25 years ago, the Sailor was always broke. But nowadays, they've got enough money. They're okay. And because of the organization with the arcades, the way they started to get to know each other and the way they started to do stuff together, they were able to kind of build into this area. And Spokane, it has a lot of military bases around it, but it does not have any of the organization needed. It's just starting into that. I think the closest we've got to beginning is the Jedi Alliance, and they're great people, but that's not every arcade in Spokane. There's very very few places. Wonderland is also another place. And yeah, one or two places is not, or 3 or 4 places is not a good arcade area. When you have 5 or 6 in Bremerton within a few blocks, it's saying something. In fact, Oz was like, I'm going to have to start opening up my own arcade because I own so many machines. My wife was like, oh, time to take care of this. So I decided. So during this trip, I guess I did a bar crawl only for arcades, and I think this is actually the Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I think that's Oz's because I've seen it in its shed. And ooh, I didn't even see the Neo Geo. Nice. And yeah, because Spokane doesn't have that organization, it doesn't have any of the setup that's needed. And hi, Rebecca. So that's what was going on, or that's what's going on. And the best way to set up an arcade scene isn't to create an arcade, it's to start to get all the collectors together and chatting and working together and start putting on shows. And through these shows, you can find out the interest level of everybody in town, and through that, you can find out how many arcades are actually needed in the area. And I just realized that's a great business plan to work through and how to do things like that. So that is my added 2 cents. And I just wanted to add this on to this video. It will show up later. And, sailors with nothing to do tend to be pretty geeky from what I have observed. All my friends who have been in the Navy are all geeks, are fairly geeky, because you're on a ship for, 2-3 months at a time, and you've got nothing better to do for 8 hours. And, yeah, you're going to be kind of a dirty sailor, but you're also very likely going to do something pretty geeky, watch every movie you could possibly think of, or, read a bunch of books, or play board games on ship. And that's just going to lead to a lot of very geeky people who kind of want that when they're docked. So we have all these things providing that for them. And, the classic consoles and all that just helps rebuild that idea. So that is what I discovered, and I just wanted to explain that to you while I was here. Catch you later. Instead of just head out today, I decided to go to WorkSource in Kitsap County. It's pretty easy to find from where I was staying. And I decided to just go there and check it out. And frankly, everything there wasn't designed for somebody like me. And it became very obvious and incredibly awkward. They kept on asking, oh, you're going to come to the orientation tomorrow. I was like, I don't live here. Oh, well, you need to make the orientation tomorrow. And I was just like, no, I don't live here. Like, literally, I am leaving right after this. I wanted to see what jobs there are. Maybe if there is a job, I'll come back and I'll interview for that job. But I don't need you to tell me how to get a job. Or, it wasn't designed, it was for people who really, really needed jobs and didn't have the level of education to get, most jobs. They really leaned over backwards to help people, They offered apprenticeships and all that stuff for people who just weren't quite there. So, I honestly think this is a great resource. I just don't know if it was for me. And they had some nice flowers around, and I was just like, and they were very friendly, but it was also kind of like, oh, you're asking for a job here. And there was a point where I got into the elevator and, I hit the first floor and it never went down. It never moved. Turns out I was on the first floor. I had to go to basement because, that makes sense for a building. Anyway, and it literally took me up to the second floor. And I mean, I don't even know they wouldn't even tell me which floor it was because that might be too much. And, I'm trying to be nice and friendly and stuff, but I can't, I'm trying to just get out and I can't even do that correctly. But there were nice flowers and it seems like a really great place. So if you're watching this and you just need a job, WorkSource will do. You know what? I am actually going to submit a resume simply because, hey, I like to live in Bremerton, and if they've got jobs, fine. I will accept this. I just haven't felt this way since I was in community college, and they were like, oh, you're not good at math. You're not very good at math. And that's honestly a personal frustration where I was just like, fine, I'll be a historian then. Yeah, that was a nightmare. But you know what? It's a nice building. It's in a very nice town, and they were very friendly. So just Pete, all the that past stuff beyond that seemed like a good place. So I would recommend it. And yeah, these are all flowers found around that building. And some guy had a Welsh flag on his car. So hey, go Wells. Um, and I made a I drove to the best of my ability all the way back to Ellensburg, and it did not take up anywhere near the amount of gas as it took to get to Bremerton from Ellensburg. It took up three-quarters of my tank to get to Ellensburg. To get to Bremerton. To get back to Ellensburg, it only took half a tank. And that's huge. On the other hand, I got this great photo, and this photo too. And I stopped off in Ellensburg, and I was like, you know what? That's it. I'm going to Taco Del Mar. I just like the place. So I went to Taco Del Mar. I got a water cup. And the reason why I took this picture is this is the last hand dryer I've seen, or this style of hand dryer I've seen. They've gotten rid of all of them. I don't know why. They just have. They're just no longer around. 5 years ago, they were everywhere, and now not so much. I think it's because people made a rumor about that people peeing them in them, but whatever. And Taco Del Mar kind of changed around a bit, and it's looking really nice. And I had a good meal. That little thing right there, that's my meal. And pretty much my gas mileage just was back to normal. It only took half a tank from Ellensburg to get here. And honestly, it was a way easier trip than it was to Bremerton, from where I am now. And it was weird because it was the same weather. It was a lot of the same problems, but somehow something was different. And I don't know what that difference was, but it was worth a quarter of a tank of my gas. And there were times on the trip to Bremerton where I would try to fill up and it never quite filled up. And I didn't know why. So now the tank is working again and everything is working. And I've got to tell you, driving in heavy rain is like driving in the dark, only your headlights have a strobe effect on them. Doop, 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 doop. Man, I hope a deer doesn't cross right now. Uh, but it was way safer this time than the one time while back where I actually hydroplaned off the road. I was fine. I was safe, but it was a really freaky experience. So I was being really extra careful this time. Anyway, that was my trip. I'm going to talk about planning in May and why a thing would be good. And I've really thought about it. How do conventions and these clubs help out and move and network and create these things into an environment, and how they figure out all of this stuff. So I'm going to talk about that later, but for now, I am done, and catch you all later.